In this video, you'll be learning how to write basic unit tests in JavaScript using Jest. I'll show you a TDD pattern where you have 3 steps: red, green, refactor. So essentially you're writing failing tests first, making the test pass, refactor if needed, and repeat. We are going to write a simple function that returns a sum of 2 numbers. I have an empty project here. I'm going to initialize our project with default settings, and we need to write a script to run the tests. Okay, we're using Jest. Let's go ahead and install Jest as our dev dependency. Now let's create a file name called sum. This will have our function to return sum of 2 numbers. Usually you'll create a test file next to your implementation file so that you can quickly navigate between them. So now let's create a function that we can call from our test file. For now, it'll be an empty function that returns nothing. Like I said earlier in TDD, we start off with failing tests. So let's go ahead and create all those test cases. Test is a Jest API which you can use to construct your test. You need to first describe what you're testing. Example, your test should return a value for 2 numbers. So let's start off with happy paths. Example, 1 plus 2 should return 3, and minus 2 plus 1 should return 1. Expect is a Jest API where you test your expression on the left to the right. Here we're saying we want to expect value of sum of 2 numbers to be 3 or minus 1. Now let's run the tests using our script, and they are now failing as expected, and this is step number 1 in TDD. Let's go ahead and implement our logic to actually make these tests pass. And as you can see, the tests are passing now, and our function is working correctly for these test cases, which completes our step number 2 in TDD. So we've come from red to green, and now let's check if we can refactor anything in the function. As you can see, the function isn't doing much, so we can just leave it for now. Which concludes our step 3 in the TDD cycle. So just to recap, step 1, we just wrote test cases, ran the tests so they fail. Step 2, made those tests cases pass by writing a minimum code. Step 3, looked at improving the code, if any. So that's all there is to TDD. We just need to repeat the cycle. We've only included happy path here, which does not deal with any edge cases. So as you can see, we have 1 plus 2 and minus 2 plus 1. So they don't do any of the edge cases. Now let's go ahead and see if we can test any other scenarios that might break our function. We need to think about how the consumer use this function and cannot assume consumer will always pass in A or B. So back to our first step in TDD, we'll write failing tests and write what the expectation is in each case. In all the case, if A or B is not defined, we want to return, for example, NaN, so that we can display that to the user. Each one of these tests should only test one scenario. So for example, if you're testing null and 2 to be NaN, then there shouldn't be any more than one expectation. But there are times where you might need to expect more than one, but in this scenario, it's a simple function, so 1 should be enough. Let's run those tests again. As you can see, only 2 tests are now failing. This is because JavaScript treats undefined as NaN, And when you add a number to nan, you always get nan. Great, we didn't have to do anything in this case. The other two are failing because we're adding number to null, so we need to fix that. Moving on to step 2 of TDD. Remember that you're only adding code to make those tests pass, even if your code is ugly. So do not hesitate to write any ugly code. So I'm just going to check if A is not defined and return nan. Simple as that. So now if you run the test, that's going to make one test pass and one more to go. So we need to do similar for the value B. So all our tests are now passing, including previous tests that we wrote. So we are confident that our function is working in these edge cases. Moving on to step 3 of the TDD. Let's see if we can refactor the code to make it better. We have a nicer way to handle this, so let's quickly make that change. So instead of doing if and else in a separate line, so we can just do it in one line, like so. With this new change, you can see our tests are still passing, and you can see we refactored some code without breaking our feature. Let's imagine sometime in the future another dev comes in. They can now easily look at the test cases and understand what the sum function is doing. And if they unintentionally change something, that's going to break the test. So tests also kind of act as a documentation to your code. Although our function look very simple, imagine when you have hundreds of lines of code, which is very normal. Without tests, you are trying to refactor, there is a high possibility that you'll break the feature. The other advantage of unit testing is it will make you think about all the edge cases your code can have. So for example, in our case, even though it was a simple function to add two numbers, there could be other edge cases that we wouldn't normally think about. Hope this video was helpful. If you're just starting out unit tests, let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see more of these videos, and I'll catch you on the next video.